Hey, right after AIM, we're going to be setting up Christmas trees in the church. There's a number, like 13 different trees. But if we have enough volunteers, we could set them up like lickety-split. But anyway, we're going to watch a video this morning. And after the video, the discussion questions for it are pretty much on the sheets on your table. If you need extra sheets, let me know. We got some. So without further ado, Vern, let's go into the video. In the area where we talked about facing trials, 25 through 28, you remember when we went through this, we talked about that one slide that talked about how only God can turn a mess into a message, a test into a testimony, a trial into a triumph, and a victim into a victor. And if you remember my story, you remember that it was a mess. And God did turn it into a message, didn't he? I mean, we just went through 4 weeks of these things. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you guys, I really believe the message, this message that I've been kind of unpacking during those 4 weeks may be one of the most important messages we've had in 25 years of full-time ministry. I really believe it's that important. So God turned that mess into a powerful message. And it was a test. And he turned it obviously into a testimony that I can now share with a lot of different people. It was also a trial. We can look back and say now there is a triumph that we experienced as we went through that. And I really did enter this thing considering myself a victim, and now I consider myself a victor. The 6 things that he taught me during this time, if you remember, let's just rehearse them. Are you believing and expecting? It's one thing to go out and talk about this thing we call faith, guys, but it's another thing when you go through a tough time like this to ask the question, man, do I really believe this stuff? Am I believing and am I expecting? And they're different, by the way. I think I shared with you that a woman can believe she's going to become pregnant one day, but when that same woman is expecting, she buys the furniture. There's a whole different mindset, a whole different attitude. And this is tied very, very strongly to our intimacy with God and our trust in God. And then number 2, in the midst of your trial, do you have a thankful heart? You remember that trip to the hospital where I was whining and complaining, and God tapped me on the shoulder and says, hey, Vince, you think there's anything in your life you might be thankful for? My response was, yes, Lord, there are. And he didn't let me get away with that. He said, what are they? And as I began to rehearse the things I was thankful for, guys, I'll be honest with you, all that whining and complaining went away. It's pretty difficult to be thankful and have a thankful heart and consider yourself a whiner and a victim. And then the third one was, are you letting go? And in the midst of your struggle, are you letting go, or do you have this tension and this stress inside of you that because you can't control it, it's eating away at you? And that's what was happening with me. I finally had to get a point. You remember when I held my wife's hands up in that room that day and just released her and put her in God's hands, how important that was to just get out of the way and let God do what he wanted to do. And then have you come to the end of yourself? This was huge for me, guys. I was dealing still with a lot of pride in my life, and God was calling me to say, Vince, you're not God. You need to step back and you need to have a humble heart and recognize where you and I begin and end, and it's not where you think. And then, have you asked God to show you your lesson? You remember the clots that my wife experienced, that major surgery where they had to go in and remove clots out of her lungs that were really putting her life at risk. And then God sharing with me, Vince, you got a lot of clots, but they weren't physical, they were spiritual clots. And guys, we all have spiritual clots in our life. We all have points in our life where we know we need to reach down in there and get rid of those things in order for the wind of the Spirit of God to blow through our life in the way He fully intends. Just like my wife, in the physical sense, needed air to get into her lower chamber for her very survival. We need that, guys, for our spiritual survival. And then the last one, you remember I was complaining to God that I was really, really weary of not seeing more of His miracles, and that was the tender reminder to me of all the different times in little simple ways that God showed up in that hospital room. And the time when she just grabbed my hand and squeezed it in a sensitive way where I could see that for the first time there was life, for the first time there was something happening with her physically. It was just so incredible. And as I experienced that, a little tear came down, and God reminded me of all these things, and He said, Vince, you're complaining about the miracles. Listen, those are my miracles. And He said, Vince, when you quit looking for me in the sensational, listen, you'll find me in the simple. Are we seeing God in the simple things that are around us, guys, every day? And then we finished with what I call the secret to life. And you remember the illustration. These are my circumstances. They're right in front of me. They won't go away. And then God, where's God? Oh, He's out there. But my circumstances are defining me. You know, that I'm popping pills at night, trying to get to sleep. I can't get to sleep. And that the secret to life is that I'm looking at God, but look, I'm looking at God through the lens of my circumstances. So if I'm having a tough time, God's a little fuzzy to me. And the secret to life was a pretty simple exercise. It was simply this, guys. That's all there is to it. It's that simple exchange of putting God between me and my circumstances. And now what's happening? Did my circumstances go away? Certainly not. But what lens am I looking through now? Why? I'm looking through God's eyes. I'm seeing my circumstances through the eyes of Jesus. And look, guys, two things are true here. Not only are they going to look different when I see them through God's eyes, but watch this. Those same circumstances can't get to me unless He lets them through. Will He let some of them through? Sure. But you can be assured that when He does, that whatever He lets through is intended to build us and to build our character, and it'll be good for us as long as we keep Him there. Now, the next two sessions, we dealt with a man and his wife, part 1 and part 2. In the first part, we explored the differences between men and women, and we talked about men and women differing in the area of our past experiences, our physiological makeup, our fallen nature, and our natural gifts. And we unpacked in the second session the profound differences that exist as a result of the curse that was placed upon the man and the woman going all the way back to the garden. We talked about how a man's greatest need is to feel significant, and a woman's greatest need is for security. Our greatest fear as men is failure. A woman's greatest fear is abandonment. But it all went back to the curse. The curse on the woman was that she was going to desire her husband, and her husband would rule over her. And we talked about how that isn't a lording it over. It's becoming a place of security. And for a man, that he was now, as the result of sin, going to have to labor and toil hard to produce anything. And how work was pre-fall, but now work was going to be tough stuff for guys. But listen, it all started with a curse. And the way we react to our fears and needs drive us apart if we're not mature enough to understand that the devil's using these against us. Well, the idea we unpacked is if it all started with a curse, who is the only one that can redeem a curse? And guys, of course we know only our God can do that. We were never meant to get our needs met on our lateral plane. It's in our relationship with God. And then we moved on to session 31, a man and his family. We talked about how important it is for a man to understand his role as prophet, priest, and king in his home. And as the prophet, the family prophet has his back to God, facing the family. He represents God to his family, passes on biblical truth and encourages. As the priest, his back is to his family, facing God. He stands in the gap, prays for them daily, discovers their needs, presents those to God. And as the king, he's there to lead, protect, provide for, and to discipline. These are important things for us to remember. The 3 lies that men believe: my work is a priority, my money will solve all my problems, and the amount of time I spend with my family is not as important as the quality. We broke those myths, and I hope you took notes on that. And then we finished with 32, A Man and His Kids. We recommended the reading by Gary Smalley's book, The Key to Your Child's Heart, very important. It's easier to build a child than it is to repair an adult. The old proverb that says, train up a child in the way he should go. Our responsibility is to remember our kids are a gift and a blessing. Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Our kids, they are not an accident. Your hands made me and formed me, it says in Psalm 119:73. And God loves them and wants us to love them too. Is very important for us to understand. Then our responsibility is to teach. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. And our responsibility is also to provide for them. There's a reminder. After all, children should not have to save up for their parents, but parents for their children. And we need to understand these ideas and revisit them now as we get into our discussion time here in just a moment. So, life implication. Dealing with trials and understanding how to be a better husband, dad, and family leader is critical to becoming the man that God intended. So, under life application, you should have already downloaded, if you haven't already, go to otm.co and download the handouts and commitment card. Here's an opportunity for you to make notes even for the other members in your group and how to pray for them as you drill down through these areas. And on a scale maybe of 1 to 10, how am I dealing with my trials in my life? Am I placing God in front of my trials? How about understanding my wife and dealing with fears and needs? Am I being the prophet, priest, and king in my home, and am I becoming a great dad? On a scale of 1 to 10, you can rate those things, have a discussion about them, and ask the men to pray for you in areas that you still need work. I pray God blesses you and that you have a rich time talking about these things together. And let's look forward to our next session, shall we? Until then, don't forget about it.
So go ahead and you have the life application questions and at your table, go ahead in your groups. Tables that are like John, why don't you come down here to the first timer table? And tables that are small, Joe, you can jump over here, okay? Just so we get a little more discussion. If you're by yourself, it's kind of hard, although I do talk to myself quite a bit, so, all right.